Welcome to the Insights to Communicate podcast with Adam Probalski, where communications, research, and strategy come together.
Michele Steeb, thanks a ton for joining. We're going to talk about homelessness because you're an expert, and that means you actually do this. You're involved in it. You know how this works. There's a lot of people I think who think they're experts on homelessness that kind of look at it from an academic perspective, but you're in the trenches. Before we do that, give us the 90-second bio. You and I know each other from California, from politics, from government, and that's not really your world anymore. So tell us kind of where you started and how you ended up where you are.
Sure. Well, we met when I was at the California Chamber back in, the middle part of the 2000s. Ended up joining the board of a struggling homeless shelter in 2006, and it nearly closed its doors in December of 2006. The chamber lent me to them for a couple months to kind of turn things around, and I fell in love and never went back. Back to the chamber. I had served 13 years at St. John's, grew it from a 30-day emergency shelter to Northern California's largest program for homeless women and children that really helped them work towards self-sustainability. And love doing it, and love connecting with you on this topic. It's so important, especially in California, that we get a much better handle on what has led to this crisis and how to turn it around.
And you live where now?
I live in North Texas, just about 45 minutes north of Dallas.
I live in California. You used to be here. I'm sure you know what California is like when it comes to homelessness. What's the big difference between homelessness in California and homelessness in Texas?
Well, let me give a little bit broader context, if I may.
Yeah.
So in 2008, excuse me, the federal government brought in a treatment, if you will, for the chronically homeless population called Housing First. And what that meant was just get them off the streets as quickly as possible, get them into housing, and they will begin to stabilize, and don't require them to engage in any services, don't require them to be sober. But once they stabilize, they'll start to request those services. It was modeled after a program in New York City for the chronically homeless, street homeless there. And so the Bush administration actually brought that in for that population, which back then and today is somewhere, depending on where you are in the country, it's about 10 to 20% of the overall homeless population. It's a small segment, an important segment, but it's small. In 2013, the Obama administration rolled it out as a one-size-fits-all approach to homelessness, meaning that anyone who enters homelessness, the goal is get them into a permanent housing unit as quickly as possible. Don't require anything of them, no work, no sobriety, no engagement in mental health or drug and alcohol counseling. And again, they'll start to stabilize, and then they'll request those services. It has not played out that way. Number one, there's so many studies that show that they don't request those services, and they end up perishing in very high numbers in that housing. But number two, and in California in particular, we haven't figured out how to build enough housing. Back when this was started in 2013 as a one-size-fits-all, already there was an affordable housing shortage in the United States. And in particular, in places like California, it's even more exacerbated now. So what's happening is, as people wait for the keys to their apartment, they're forced to line up on the streets. When they're forced to line up on the streets, they're getting sicker and sicker and sicker because of all of the elements that they engage in living on the streets. Their mental illness gets worse, their addiction gets worse, the trauma gets worse, and it's just become a massive failure. The homeless population from 2014, when it was rolled out in 13, so take it from 14 until today, is at the highest point ever. It's increased by 35%, almost 35%. California is the only state in the nation that actually adopted housing first into state statute following the federal government. They did that in 2016. California, homelessness under the one size fits all housing first approach has increased by 40%. You guys are now, leading the nation in terms of the growth. So it's really not worked. I'm really excited to talk to you about, how to fix it. The president's two recent executive orders open the door to building a much more effective system, but there's a lot of work ahead in terms of how we do that.
That's awesome history because I don't think a lot of people understand, right, how it happens. A lot of people just
Yeah,
see homeless people and wonder how did this happen and why it's
right.
happening. And there's an assumption that homelessness is about mental illness, it's about drug abuse. And then there's some idea out there that some homelessness is about people who don't have enough money or can't afford housing, but it's really kind of not. I think it's gone by the wayside. Most people really look at homelessness from a mental illness and a drug abuse standpoint, and not about the financial impact. And I know that's a major part of it. We do a lot of polling and research on homelessness, and no matter the community, no matter the party makeup, it is always a kind of insensitive, get them out of my sight kind of commentary from the public. And part of that comes from a concern over safety, because these are people who are acting outside the social norms. And when you see someone acting outside the social norm, you get uncomfortable.
Yep.
It's a reality. Or people who don't look like you or talk like you, there's different levels of comfort people have. So how do we talk about, and we're all about communicating here, and how do we talk about homelessness to make it clear what this is about to the public?
So again, if you don't mind, let me give you a little context in terms of the perceptions that you just talked about. So if you look at the data, and let's look at the program I ran, homeless women and children, largest in Northern California. 78% of our women struggled with addiction, 70% with mental illness, 70% with domestic violence, 65% had criminal histories. If you look at other studies, non-government studies in particular, they say somewhere between 75 and 80% are struggling with addiction and mental illness. Also physical, illnesses, trauma is mixed into all of this. But basically it is, and the population that you alluded to a little earlier, those that were maybe living on the edge and they lost their job and it pushed them over the edge, or they had a healthcare event, weren't able to work, and that pushed them over the edge into homelessness, right? That's somewhere around 10% of the overall homeless population, though I would say growing because of the economy and a lot of other factors that we don't need to go into here. But it really, let's say it's 10 to 20%. That's leaves a big percentage that are struggling with, and maybe they weren't struggling with mental illness or addiction prior to entering homelessness, but they developed it because of that cycle, right? The trauma experienced in homelessness. Nonetheless, it doesn't matter if they started with it or they have it now. We've got to treat it, and that's what the system has failed to do under the housing first approach. In fact, when they rolled it out in 2013, they said, we're no longer HUD, meaning the Department of Housing and Urban Development, we're no longer going to fund mental illness and addiction and employment training. We're going to take all that money that we were using to fund those things, and we're going to put it into housing vouchers, housing subsidies. And so the system has been devoid for 11 years of any treatment. So people, their illnesses have gone untreated and they're getting sicker and sicker, right? So that is, I think, important context and really speaks to the perceptions that you shared earlier. In terms of, how to talk about this,
Yeah.
let me start how not to talk about it.
Right.
First of all, don't say you're going to end homelessness. Any community that says that, you're setting yourselves up for failure. Homelessness has always been with us. It biblically was always with us. I mean, it's been with us since since the beginning of time. And because of downstream and upstream issues that, that really lead to homelessness. So don't say you're going to end homelessness. You can say you're going to end it for an individual, and we can end it for individuals. And I, wrote a book about it, and all my work is designed about how we do that. But you can't say you're going to end homelessness and succeed. That's number one. Number two, again, we talked about these numbers, right? About 80% of the population are struggling with mental illness and addiction. 10 to 20% got pushed over the edge. So we should not use terminology that is so you almost get shot if you don't use it. So, the more woke terminology, but don't call this an unhoused issue. This is not an issue of people who lost housing. They lost housing because they didn't, number one, they had a deficit of income. And number two, they had a deficit of support. And so we really need to talk about this issue in broader context than just housing. And I would say number three, this is one of the things that they're addressing in the Trump administration is addressing in the executive orders. There is no one size fits all approach to homelessness. Just like there's no, it's like saying, here we are, all the kids are going back to school. There's one type of shoes that they can buy in one size. It's craziness. We don't do one size fits all in education. We don't do it in shoes. We don't do it we can't do it in anything that has the kind of complexities that homelessness has. So those are the big don't do's.
And so what do you do?
Yeah.
Right? What is the next step? And I want to come at it from like a policymaker standpoint, because federal and state government are going to do what they're going to do, and certainly local policymakers can have some influence there. But you're a city council member, a county commissioner, Texas county judge, whatever you are, and you want to take action. We now know, don't say we're going to end homelessness, which is a really popular kind of phrase, or at least
Absolutely.
a popular goal for people to have. What's the next step? I mean, there's all this idea that, oh, we should work with our nonprofit community. And then on the other extreme, there's, we need to raise wages, which I'm not going to dispute is, a bad idea, but that's not going to solve homelessness, right? If we give people an extra $5 an hour, today. So what's the next step for local policymakers?
Well, the good news is, again, the Trump administration, whether you like him or not, issued two executive orders over the last couple weeks. One ending disorder, and then another really related to DC, but not. It's really enumeration of the first executive order, which is the addressing the beautification and crime in DC. And what the president's really saying in both of those orders is that we need a different approach to homelessness, that there is a lot of, not that, and he doesn't say, and I think this is really important, he doesn't say that it is a crime to be homeless. What he says in these executive orders is there's a lot of linkages to crime from the homeless community, because if you don't have a source of income to eat or to take a shower or to get drugs, and you're addicted to drugs, then you're going to resort to crime to do that, right? So or if your mental illness is untreated and it continues to be untreated, just like yesterday in New York City, we had a couple people walking through the park. One got his ear almost bit off, and two were lit on fire by a 27-year-old homeless individual who had a long history of mental illness documented, and a long record of criminal justice involvement. So you can't, there are linkages that you can't deny. And what the president's saying in those EOs is, okay, we're now going to focus on providing mental health treatment, drug and alcohol counseling, on restoring these individuals. And in some cases, it may need to be mandatory. The program that I ran was not mandatory, people had the choice of entering it, but so many people are used to a system that says, hey, do what you want in the name of compassion. And that's going to be reversed with this executive order. So the first thing I would say is watch out for, this administration, especially the second time around, they're moving quickly. Watch out for what's coming down the pipeline. There's going to be some very big and swift changes, and your community needs to be ready to respond to say, here's how we're going to handle building programs that don't really exist now, that restore lives, that address treatment, and that do it sometimes on a mandatory basis. But also, and related to that is clearing encampments, because once you have those program spaces available, you're going to have to compel people to use them.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate fact, is people are so sick now.
So I don't want to belabor the California situation, but Governor Newsom has taken some pretty aggressive action on homelessness, or at least encouraged aggressive action.
Yes.
He's told the state to clean up encampments in places where the state controls, and he's pretty strongly encouraged local jurisdictions to do the same, clean up encampments. And that was a function of, I think it was a federal ruling that basically said that you could, right? Because prior to that, there was all kinds of complications of not being able to do that. So now there's
It was actually a Supreme Court ruling in the summer, that Newsom followed on to pretty aggressively, pretty quickly. Yeah.
So is that something that and I don't love the politics that I used to love necessarily, but it exists. And so that's something that a Democratic governor in California is doing. Is that happening in other states now that that's available to them? Or regardless of party, is that like being rolled out where other states, Dem and Reap, are kind of cleaning up encampments and trying to push people into programs and find ways of getting people off the street?
Well, let me say that the mistake Governor Newsom made, it's really a twofold mistake. One is he started clearing encampments before there were places for people to go to get help.
Okay.
Right? California, because they're the only state in the nation that doubled down on the federal government's housing first approach. The only thing that's available to the homeless there are low barrier shelters that are chaos and crime ridden because there's no rules, or to sit on the streets and wait for permanent housing that may never come. Those are the options in California, unless you go to a faith-based program. So Governor Newsom started clearing encampments before he had spaces available for people to go. So I absolutely disagree with the way that he's handled this. Eventually, once you build that program capacity, you need to clear encampments. It's not safe for, the people living in them. It's not safe for the general public, as we heard from that example yesterday in New York City. That's one of them of many, many. But the second mistake that he made is he shifted the blame to local jurisdictions, which I wrote about it. It was completely unfair for him to do, because he has handcuffed local jurisdictions to only implementing housing first with all those state dollars, right? So local jurisdictions get money from the federal government that up until now has been handcuffed to housing first. And then the state dollars have all been handcuffed to housing first. So if Gavin Newsom really wants to solve this problem, he's going to unhandcuff local governments from doing one thing, and one thing that doesn't work in particular, which is housing first.
Okay. So we want to tell the world what the story is. What's our three pieces of information that we want everyone to know? Not just policymakers, the public. Like what do we all have to kind of be on the same page with? What three things do we all have to know to kind of get from here to there, or advance the ball a little bit?
Yeah. Well, one is we got to start with the belief that this can be reversed at the individual level, right? And I firmly believe that. I watched it happen in thousands of cases in my 13 years, wrote a book about it, and I am now fully focused. It's my life's work to change policy, because I fully believe I know in my heart, I know in my head that this can be changed at the individual level, and we need to start with that belief. Number two is we need to build a system that really, no one raised their hand in first grade when the first grade teacher said, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" No one raised their hand. I am 1000% confident in this. No one raised their hand and said, "I want to be homeless on the streets and addicted." They didn't want that from their lives. We have to understand that they're human beings and they can be restored. Maybe not to the utmost fully functioning level, but we need to start with the hope that this can be turned around and that human lives are resilient and they can be restored, and we need to work towards that. And number three, we need to be ready. We need to be ready for these, this new approach to come out to build these systems that are going to lead to restoration and recovery. And those are the three things I'd suggest we leave with.
Fantastic. Much appreciated, noble cause, and thank you very much for giving us the tools we need for next steps.
Thank you, Adam.
This has been Insights to Communicate with Adam Probalski, president of the woman and Latina-owned market and opinion research firm, Probalski Research.